Do I need to make my mic hot, or is someone doing
It's
that?
all ready to go.
I'm like, all right. Thank you for the opportunity to have the conversation today. We've had some conversations, maybe in small groups, around the UWWC property. I was a member of the task force that looked at that piece of property. So just furthering that conversation, I was asked today if I would be willing to come and have a discussion with the executive committee around some of those pieces and some of those potential plans. So in the past, again, the area superintendents, you have multiple school districts. You should be really proud of the collaboration that goes on across school districts. We're all very in tune to creating opportunities for kids across those districts. So we had given some information to both Josh Shulman as well as Joel Ongert around the potential that campus holds for the future, maybe a little bit longer term future. So we'd be very interested in furthering those conversations as well as a team. But today I'm talking about the interest that West Bend has and some of the programming that we have and how we might be able to collaborate on that. So fast forward a little bit, we've had lots of tours. I said I think I could give that tour myself at this point on that campus. But we've talked with, just minimally with our board. Right now, people might not realize I have a lot of additional programs. If you're familiar with where Badger Middle School is, our directive, our office operations are right across the street in the Education Service Center. I have about 125 students being served in the basement of what is an office building. So looking at some space and maybe a first step forward on how we could collaborate and create opportunities for programs. So those programs that we have on that campus are a mix of credit acceleration, some alternative education, some at-risk programming, and there's also future opportunities. All of us serve some programs, 18 to 21-year-old programming. So students with significant disabilities who might post graduation, they're allowed to have service through age 21. Right now they're at different unique spots, or they might maintain some services at our high school post-graduation. We'd like to look even longer term for those students. But of utmost importance to us is those 125 students that are in the basement. There's no exterior light, there's no amenities on that campus. So we started talking about, as we figure out a long-term plan for the WWC campus and what that could do, what maybe could we start with and grow with. So we've looked at and identified some space, roughly about 4,000 of a 6,000 square foot office space to look at and maybe serve some of those programs there. We also have talked about some things that we could work in collaboration with the county. You have viable space with the gym, the theater, all of those. So how do you manage those spaces? We're in that business when we manage our schools, our community schools as well. So we manage some of those. So right now we are looking at, and we could step forward with a small piece of programming on that campus. So we're ready to do that and to talk about what expressing our interest looks like. And I know that you're figuring that out as a team, and what would you be looking for. So we're looking for just a small sliver and then a larger, maybe future opportunity to have collaboration across districts, or some opportunities with agencies that we utilize as tuition placements. So we use multiple agencies to serve students that maybe can't be served in our public school settings. And right now that's happening at not only the cost for the tuition seat, but also significant transportation costs around that. So just looking at viable partners in that space as well. So that kind of takes us to where those conversations are. Certainly we've had conversations around, hey, you've got that building accessible and ready. It looks like the class just went out for a break. So how might we collaborate on using a little bit of that footprint now, showing people and modeling how that could be used or expanded on in the future, and how you could co-serve in a community. There's certainly opportunity for, childcare, for elder, senior, which fits into, I think, some of the preliminary conversations this team has had as you figure out the vision for that campus as well. I'll pause there. Are there any questions around kind of what we're looking at, who we serve, how we serve? Yeah, go for
Sure.
it.
Thank you.
Just one question. So next week we're starting the master plan committee, and one of the things we're going to look at is what are we thinking about doing with that building. You had mentioned that 4,000 square feet is kind of what your interest level is. Do you have any idea what that square footage might be in your longer term plan?
Sure. So that depends on, are there multiple services on campus? So when we look at, that's me, and I'm one district, so I can only speak to that. But certainly, your other superintendents have interest, because then we could consolidate some programming and look at that a little bit more robustly in the future. And again, we're looking at a continuum of programs. We had met last year. Again, we were, I was a rep for the team in the task force, so we were looking at potential pieces. There's some other campuses and models in the state on how do you create programs that might be specialized. Perhaps there is a strand of engineering or things that we're building together. It's no different how we came together for the EMS and fire piece, and then where do we locate that and how do we do that? So it's a fantastic location that lends itself to future collaboration and consolidation of services and opportunities for kids across those districts. Outside of the 5 that we serve, I know that we've also looked at alternative programming, even larger footprint, other outlying area districts who just don't have access to some things. So sometimes we're the county seat in West Bend. So sometimes maybe as the largest in size, maybe we start something and then they have seats and room and we collaborate that way. Or we're all doing a program. As I said, the 18 to 21-year-old programming, we're all doing that. And we want those to be authentic community-based experiences. How might we all come together and work together? So we have those opportunities too. We've had just some preliminary dialogue what our ideas could be to expand that. But one of those things is, how do you start now? And then how can we help facilitate or foster some of those conversations with the community and all those partners who might be interested?
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions from the committee? Just one, as we're talking about collaboration, you definitely have an interest in the building, right? We all have it. We have the interest of yes, the West Bend School District,
yep.
but also the whole county. As we're looking at making arrangements, is it your understanding or is it your intention that whatever allotment there might be, whatever lease arrangement there might be, would be at market rate or reduced rate for? How are you thinking?
So we
as
have
you've
not,
thought about
yeah.
it, how would we approach that?
So there's multiple avenues to do that. So we've had no conversations, which there's promises or rates or anything like that, but we've talked about different models that you can do. So generally, if you're working with, it depends on the agency, right? You're going to have to set your rate on who that person is. Are they, public entities? Are they, how are we co-serving? That kind of piece. So there's all different. There's also different rates. So generally you can look at lease. So it's no different than when I would lease my own building for use, right? Because we're looking at different schools and opportunities too. So you can, again, is it a different profiting agency, maybe one of those outside players with tuition seats and all of that, and there's a standard market rate. There's a costed rate where I'm absorbing all my costs in that, and then I'm contributing a smaller piece because there's something, you as the landlord have to think about, I got to bank some money for future improvements, these kinds of things. Or there's also how can services offset, where said, you know what, you probably don't want to navigate having to, deal with everyone who wants at the theater, the gym, et cetera. How could we do some services in kind? How could we bring in those pieces? Who's doing your building checks? Who's doing that? I think that's all for your group to talk about and think about. Do you want to do that in stages, tiers? Depends on who that partner is. Those are really the questions that face you as you do that. Certainly, we'd have to thoughtfully consider, because where our savings would be is if there were additional agencies under that umbrella where I can pick up and save a significant amount of transportation for some of those specialty services that exist outside of our school districts right now. That's still a cost savings to us as well, but that's a separate agency, and they have generally different rates in those. There's also pieces of agreements, so we can as districts enter into specific shared agreements for services so that there's one fiscal agent and one dealing with that, instead of you having to deal with multiple players under that umbrella. So it's a lot, for you guys to consider as well.
It is.
Yep.
And thank you for that answer. I'm glad, basically what you're telling us, yeah, we want to collaborate on that.
But I
And-
can only afford so much, just as you can.
Right. Got it. Very good. Supervisor Kelling.
And I guess just speaking for myself and the direction I'd like to see it go, I like the idea of sort of a management relationship where whomever, basically, I would assume, let's just say you, for instance, where you would parcel out, okay, we'll take care of the auditorium, we'll take care of all the different community things. I know you have certain rates and stuff like that you do, because as far as I would see it as the county, I would like to see something that's kind of hands-off and fairly neutral as far as costs go. So offset, I mean, you've got boilers, you've got chillers, you've got parking lots, you've got.
I'm familiar.
So it's a big facility. It costs a lot of money to run. But luckily we do own it, so there's certainly some kind of advantage there. I would definitely, if we were to use it for the community, it would definitely be nice to have it be a good deal for them, which makes it a good deal for us and our quality of life, which is something that's very important to us. But I just don't want to think that people think, well, the county owns it, so we can get it for free. No, that's not how we generally operate. So that's just
Same,
my 2 cents.
yep, same with us. And that's what we said. We do have funds. When we consolidate services and collaborate in that way, we have funding sources and availability on that. And then again, we have services as well to relieve those things. So it's really, like you said, what is that relationship? How do you want to enter into that? And what's your vision? So that we can figure that out and figure out, does it make sense short term? Does it make sense long term? It'll be a really interesting dialogue to continue.
Very good.
Thank you. We should let you continue with your presentation.
No, we really are talking about that opportunity. We would be poised to start migrating students and kids. It depends on, whether you as a team would like to accelerate that, how we would do that, what those costs would be. And then, again, we're looking at really what's a benefit to us is being able to have at a little bit larger conversation, childcare around, elder care, because what happens, in addition to the programs, I can use those as training grounds for future workforce because our kids are getting certified to become future teachers. If you have those childcare, I'm placing those kids right in those rooms, they're doing their hours, they're gaining their certifications. If I'm doing any kind of services, let's say that there's some senior or some things there's food service certifications, there's all of those pieces. They can work in all these different avenues and domains around that campus as well. So there's a lot of really larger scope of opportunity that would be even bigger than just our district that we would love to really flesh out even more and have that opportunity as well. Because again, if you're looking at multi-age sites, the opportunities for kids' future workforce, navigating one of the things that we see as daycare options and growing that in a community, having something accessible for our families, our employees, where sometimes our school districts are the largest employers in any of the communities that we have. All of those opportunities, I think, are in front of us to explore some more.
Anything else? Any other questions from the committee?
I'm good.
Thank you for taking the time this afternoon to share your thoughts and to help us realize, again, we know there's a lot of stuff that could happen out there. Thanks for painting a clear picture of some of those possibilities.
And I think for you, as you said, you just need to determine when you're looking at those different partners, what you want to set as goals around recouping your costs in that, and what does that look like, so that we can maybe take a next step on some of those smaller programs. Because again, we could migrate and we could start filling those, building those sooner rather than later, while we kind of take a step and contribute to a larger vision for the campus too. So we'd appreciate that.
So when you say sooner rather than later, I'm assuming you're talking about the beginning of the 25, 26
You,
school year.
you can do that as well. Again, I have students I'm serving now. If you want us to start looking at a footprint, looking at some opportunities in a shorter term, we could start taking some of those seed programs and putting them there. That really is dependent on, like you said, things that you need to determine as a group so that we can work through and think, is that a viable option for right now? Should we be looking at the 25, 26? What should we look at long term? Yeah.
Supervisor Shadron.
Thank you again. Well, that leads me to a question for the county executive. Do you know where we're at with all the other stuff we have in the works on that building?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is absolutely the most important one. Thank you, Superintendent
Yeah.
Wimmer, for being here. And I'd be remiss if I didn't thank School Board President Zweigert, who was in the initial meeting and really helped facilitate this discussion. But as the superintendent kind of illuminated in her conversation, for us, it really boils down to how do we do this in a way that similar to what UW had, where we're very much hands-off. Like we'll manage the facility, we certainly manage the campus, but we want them to do what they do best in operating that building and having a presence and building that community that I've talked about in the past. So we're really in the stage of trying to say, are there 2 or 3 or 4 organizations that we can partner with to kind of get us to that first level. I've shared with you before kind of our operational keep the lights on, toilets flushing, faucets running is about $500,000. That's obviously too much for one program that was started with, but by about $7. So we've got to come up with no.
Right, yeah. That's why, do you miss this?
Oh,
Like,
okay,
not
right,
it.
okay. So that's why it's important that it's not just West Bend School District.
Right.
It's also all the other districts. The possibility of, for example, CISA, which is even bigger than just Washington County. If we can begin to put those parts together to be able to get to enough of a nut, if you will, to tackle that $500,000, now you can really start to open it up, whether it's childcare, senior centers, county functions, potentially, all starting to contribute. As I said when we met with City Council, the goal here is not to make a buck. The goal is to have a break-even venture that creates a community space for all these different groups. So this was all preliminary and to the point of, can we even get enough interest to go to the next step? I think we're there. I think it was an important part of why we wanted to have the superintendent here to communicate that to you rather than just hearing me blather on about it. But then also, what are the next steps? So we've shared a kind of a letter of intent process that we want to use. Really just, okay, we've talked about it. You've heard a presentation on it. Now let's get something down on paper. Who else can we get down? Is it a CISA? Is it other school districts saying, okay, yep, we've got 4,000 square feet here. This other entity wants to use 10,000. Collectively, how much does that produce in dollars and cents? Can we get to the $500,000 number? If not, how far away are we? And then is it worth kind of taking that next step? As I've shared, you've heard some today about all the different districts, the CISA. I've shared with you before about the charter school that's interested, continues to be interested. The local YMCA has been interested. There's other nonprofits. So I think for us, it's let's take inventory of all of that and then come back to you with here's the list. Here's what we think we can get to. Now, is it worth jumping in the pool or not? And we're going to have to make some decisions in relatively short order. I think once we get that letter of interest in the hands of all the parties and get that information back, we'll have enough information to come to you and say, we think we can get there or we can't. And I think we have to be real honest about that real fast because, quite frankly, if we get to July and we don't have what we need, both the school district and CISAs can't make decisions. The charter school can't make decisions, and it's all going to fall apart real quick. And quite frankly, we probably end up in a position where we're talking about doing something like Waukesha County is doing and just putting the property back on the tax roll. So 2025 is going to be the year where either we can be super innovative and we can do stuff that most of the rest of the state hasn't been able to get to, or you know what, this is just too much and it can't happen fast enough, or now's not the right time, and we need to move in a different direction. So I think it's very positive that in really 6 short months, we've got enough pieces to be able to say, all right, can we make this into a real thing or not? And hopefully just having this conversation in front of you is enough to know maybe.
Yeah, and one of the pieces when county executive is talking about kind of that letter of interest, we would reconvene our superintendent team to kind of go through those tenets. You probably saw some of our preliminary and what we were thinking. Now we've got some metrics to hit, some pieces to deliver, so we can reconvene quickly and talk about that piece of it and what that opportunity is. I'll certainly share that I spoke tonight, just kind of more ideally around the collaborative aspect, and then more succinctly about our kind of West Bend slice. But I'll bring that back. We convene regularly and just talk about this is that process. If there's anything else in that process that you'd like to see from that team as you flesh that out, we're happy to deliver that then again as a package too for consideration as you kind of weigh all those entities. So we're very happy. We have a really good ongoing communication with your organization across organizations. I think that helps us flesh that out. So if there's something in real time, hey, I'm wondering about this, or can you include this? I think you just need to express that to your county executive so that we can formalize that as part of the plan.
Supervisor Kelly.
And I guess, Josh, you heard how I feel about it. A single point management system that is basically not the county, and as well as cost neutrality, are as close to it. I mean, I think you have to be reasonable about something like this, especially in the startup, because you're talking about groups that certainly improve our quality of life, but don't exactly make a lot of money.
Right.
So I'm not trying to, beat down the little sisters of the poor here, okay? We're just trying to make sure that everything we do in county government has always been very cost conscious. How much bang do we get for the buck? And that's pretty much what we want to do here, but we're not afraid to spend a little bit to enhance the quality of life. So just want to make sure I get that.
And to be clear from my perspective, and if this is going down the wrong path from a public policy perspective, please let me know. But my thought process here is, again, roughly $500,000 in operational, probably almost that in capital on an annual basis, maybe a little less, $300,000 or $400,000 a year. And then after that, it's really kind of longer term capital expenses. So what I was thinking is if in the first couple of years, maybe 3 at the most, we can build up to that $500,000. That's probably realistic to think 2026 we're going to flip a switch and $500,000 is coming in the door. Probably won't happen. But if we can build to it, that was my hope. Meaning we'll have to subsidize it for a few years, and then eventually we can crack the nut of that initial 500 and then start eating away, if you will, at the next chunk. You got to replace the water heaters and you got to replace the rooftop units and that kind of thing. And then after that, I think it's just a matter of starting to, build a little bit of a fund. So none of us are on the hook when you've got to replace the roof, which is a big one, those types of things. So that's kind of the path I'm going down, the understanding that I have from our meeting with the city council. If that's not the path that the executive committee wants, then I need to hear that. Whether it's today or whether it's in the future. But it's an incremental, an evolutionary process, not a revolutionary process that I'm thinking about.
I would agree.
Supervisor Schadron.
To add on to that then, I know you had said other school, and I believe you mentioned as well, other schools that showed interest in this.
Mm-hmm.
How long would it take to gather that data that you need to know what sort of interest we have and how much of that building will be utilized?
Well, I can let the superintendent speak to the districts. All the groups, I think we would probably want to have that information in the next 3 to 4 months, so that by the time we're hitting, middle of the second quarter, back end of the second quarter for sure, we're in decision-making mode. Yep. So there would be like a letter of intent, which is a little bit informal, not real structured enough to say, we're getting engaged. And then the next step is, okay, it's not just a letter of intent. Now we're formulating leases and starting to put together, because one thing to keep in mind, all those different entities I've talked about, they all have unique needs, but the last thing we need is for all of them to say, we all really like that office space in the front. Well, I'm sorry, only one of you can go there. Where's the other? Yeah, of course. Where's the other groups going to go? So I would say half of this is us just trying to figure out how do all the puzzle pieces fit together in a 200,000 square foot facility. And then, of course, you're going to have the groups that already have historically been using the theater and the gym space and so forth. And then how do they slot in as well? Because you're probably not even going to make a few $1,000s off of groups like that. This is really about just kind of recoup some of the operational management costs in that regard. So that would be, I would say, the Q1 is us just trying to figure out, can we get everybody to play nice in the sandbox? And then, okay, now what does it take to actually execute? Because I assume every piece that we say, yep, this fits, that fits upstairs, this one goes down the hallway, I can't imagine they're going to be able to walk in and just flip the lights on and go, okay, let's go. There's probably going to be some modifications that need to happen. For example, childcare, we're going to need to firewall it off. What does that even mean? I don't know. So it's going to be a process. Hopefully, we get to the end of the Q2 and you can say, this one we can do within months. The next one, the start of the school year. The next piece, yeah, that's probably an 18-month project or a 12-month project. It's its own kind of master plan. And then, now how does the county fit into this? Do we need to talk about WIC going out there? Do we need to talk about ADRC going out there? Maybe they don't make sense at all. Those things I would say would probably come in the back half of the year. And then they integrate into your master plan, much longer term.
Well, that's kind of where I was going with that.
Right.
Obviously, this committee's starting up.
Yep.
At what depth do we get into that building? Because that is part of the overall planning too.
Right.
Thank you.
For us, for our perspective as well as that planning, when you're looking, you mentioned a 3 to 4 month, what I'll do is I leave this meeting today and I say we have a green light to take a next step. So then our team of superintendents will collaborate. We work across agencies. So the CISAs that he mentioned, sounds like you're well versed in that. They're regional service centers. We already work with those agencies. We work with some of the tuition placement agencies that are touring that campus as well. So as you kind of look at, so I'm going to communicate with our fellow superintendents and say, we have a green light for our next step. Let's plan some meetings. These are our targets with this letter of interest. Here's this, as well as that short and long-term timeline that I'm hearing. So we can deliver that absolutely within that time frame. And then as you look at those next players who have serious interests, then we can collaborate. Many of them are already our collaborative partners. There might be some additional agencies. And then as you've talked about, then how do you bring those parties together? Because to your point, whoever is going to have that management role or do those pieces, they're going to be positioned differently in the building. You would just come together and work those pieces out. It's a very robust campus with a lot of opportunity and space that can be utilized. So I don't foresee that as being an issue across agencies.
Thank you.
The rest of the committee? So in an answer for you, County Executive, it's my opinion that you're on the right track with wanting to proceed in that way. I think all of us want the best possible use for that building. We've, over the years, invested a lot. We and the city have invested a lot in that building. I think it's a great building that offers a lot to the community, and I would hate to see it just get torn down for more apartments. I think it has more to offer than that. That being said, I would also think that some of the collaborative entities may find, so you're right, not everybody can have the office, right? But it may be that a common receptionist may, the common receiving area, common uses may benefit several of those organizations so that they can allocate their resources better in other ways as well. So I wouldn't want to be in a position where we say, oh, no, you can't do that. They already called for that part. They got dibs. I think we definitely want to work on it in such a way that it is best for the entire community without sacrificing any individual entity's best interests. I mean, at some point, if someone's invested and they've built some things out, obviously those are going to be off limits. But until those decisions are really made, I wouldn't want to jump the gun on any of that.
Yeah, and I'm just not sure how Suns and Spartans and Orioles fit together in a space, but I'm sure they can figure it.
Just don't make
That'd be
me
a
wear
neutral
those
zone.
colors, guys.
Two points, if I may, and we spent most of our time talking about the building, which is important, but everything that we've discussed would not include what's outside the building. So there's a large parking lot area, the old soccer field. I think it was referred to at the meeting a few months back as the old potato field, which is 20 acres of beauty. All of that would still be things that can be utilized, potentially developed. Maybe there's some uses for the school that have to be thought through as well. Maybe some of them, pieces of it, go back on the tax roll and help with building, for example, an endowment fund like we've done with other things to help pay some of those long-term expenses. But that is all in addition and separate, and I would say is down the road. The other thing I want to mention, I'd be remiss if I didn't, is County Attorney Brad Stern has worked diligently on helping get us to this point and worked with outside counsel on the letter of intent and kind of some of the next steps too. So I got to thank him and our team for really getting us to this point. This is kind of above and beyond what we would normally do when we were just operating a campus and not having to worry about these things. So thank you, Brad.
Supervisor Kelling.
And just kind of one little other kind of word on that is the idea behind this whole program is that we can have something good for the community. I mean, long and the short of it, that's what this is all really about. But as a steward of the community, if it isn't going to work, if it isn't going to be a good sandbox full of great kids playing together nicely, I would choose to mothball it, get rid of it, whatever. I mean, honestly, that's the long and the short. I would love to see this happen and be a benefit to our community, but in the end, if that doesn't work, I would end it. I mean, I don't mean that to be a threat. It sounds threatening, but it's not intended to be. It's just reality. That we're here to be the good stewards of our taxpayers' money, and we will be that. So, bear word.
Thank you. And I appreciate your comment. At the same time, I would say it would be very short-sighted of us to think that the community is just 6 miles around that campus. We have a lot of area in the county that should not be precluded or excluded from access and best possible use of that as well, even though it may not be as convenient.
Agreed.
Thank you so much for coming in.
Thanks.
Thanks for the discussion. We surely appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Warren.
Moving on to item 3B, guidance on joint review board participation. And for that, I believe, is it county executive or? Very
I
good.
can introduce it, and then I'll turn it over to Aaron if that's all right with you, Mr.
That's
Chairman.
fine, thank you.
Well, thank you. So this is the second time I believe you've seen an item similar to this on your agenda. I just want to share with you, and I wasn't at the last meeting where you discussed joint review boards, but I think it is an important component that come before you as the legislative body. I certainly have opinions in the executive branch about joint review boards and TIF districts, quite strong opinions, as you might imagine, and I know you do as well. There has been several in the last couple of years that have been more complicated and more controversial than historically, I would say, and I've taken some strong stances on those. I think it's important that Aaron Dahl, who is now sitting on joint review boards, have the perspective not just of me across the hallway in his office and in our suite, but also from you as the legislative body each and every time. The best example of that was in my opinion, was the most recent Hartford TIF district. I pretty vocally objected to adding the ambulance driveway or the fire driveway, and it sounded like the committee was more open to that. As I shared with other municipalities who've since made some subsequent decisions, I'm not the king, I'm the county executive, so I think I think that's why we're here, and I want you to know that. I think it's really important for all the municipalities to be aware of that. I don't believe they believe that. So I think moving forward, if we will entertain all of these, I could walk you through all the nuts and bolts and weeds and probably drive you nuts about joint review boards and TIF districts. But I think it's important for you to autonomously, separate from me, have this discussion and opine and at least weigh in to inform Aaron's votes and decisions that are made on those joint review boards. I especially feel strongly about that because typically speaking, joint review boards are made up of representatives of each organization on your tax bill, but not by people who are elected to represent them. So even more of a reason, in my opinion, that we as elected representatives need to give a little bit of direction to administration to say, this is how we feel about item X, Y, Z. And you'll see it again today. There's some pretty complicated TIFs coming in front of you. And taxpayers from Ripon to the town of Jackson and up to Fond du Lac and everywhere in between are going to be paying for some of these things in the long term. So, or at least their tax bills could be artificially higher if we don't do our due diligence. So please take a look and take this very seriously, because it's important in informing what that joint review board does. And I think having both the legislative and the executive perspective for Aaron is critically important. So with that, I'll turn it over back to you, Mr. Chairman, and over to Aaron.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As we consider these this evening, without going off topic, I wanted to, if you recall how the last instance went, we kind of gave some information with regard to tax increment district here in West Bend. What was the result of that meeting?
Sure. With that one, I took the input that was specifically related to amending the project plan to do a project basically outside of the boundary of the district. I took the information that you provided in conjunction with the discussions with the county exec, and we, at that meeting, we were a no vote. So we were the only no vote. It did end up passing, but we were on record as a no.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, can I just
Yes,
interrupt
sir.
you one more time? I'm sorry. But I did want to make you aware, because I just checked with a couple of the audience members. There are a few members of the audience who live in the town of West Bend, which is across the street from this TIF district. Just so you're aware of that, constituents of ours, not constituents of the city. So just so you're aware, obviously you can do what you wish with that, but I wanted you to know that was happening.
Very well, thank you. We'll turn it back to Aaron Dahl for his presentation.
Great. Thanks, Josh. And thanks, everyone. Good evening. So as you gather from the packet, there are two more tax incremental districts being proposed. We're set to vote later this month on the approval of those districts or not. So the packet has a lot of information. The complete project plans are in there. So I don't plan on going through a ton of detail.
We appreciate that.
Sure. I did want to just generally comment on, historically our general perspective on TIF is it is one of the only economic development tools municipalities have. We try not to stand in the way of development as long as TIF's being used reasonably. As Josh alluded to, we typically support closing those districts as early as reasonably possible. And I think that is the point that sometimes puts us in conflict with some of these project plans. And so I'll sort of frame that discussion today from that perspective. So to start with West Bend, the TID number 17. So the map is in the packet, but it's basically 105 acres on the far northwest side of the city, sort of between 18th Avenue and Highway 45. It's calling for the early phases of the plan are 95 residential units, more residential and some industrial and commercial space later in the plan. Plan is calling for expenditures of $18 million. That's expected to generate $69 million of new property value. It's also anticipated that it'll take 20 years for the taxes on that new property value to pay off the costs of the development. The expenses being proposed, there are two major ones, costs for street and water main improvements along 18th Avenue, and the debt used to fund that, as well as some developer incentives. I think the piece that I wanted to ask the committee specifically about is section of that 18th Avenue project. The project plan is assuming about $1.7 million of costs for that stretch of 18th Avenue will occur outside of the district. So basically, the plan is showing that the city will fund a third of that 1.7 million, and the district will fund the remaining 2/3. So to go back to September, you know, this group expressed some concerns about those expenditures outside of that district. Those, we call them half-mile projects. I used that information at the time, as I noted. We were a no at that meeting. At that same meeting, I commented and discussed the potential for the city to include a cost share, because if you remember back to September, the district funded the entirety of that project. At that time, the city didn't fund a cost share in TID 16, but this particular project plan includes that cost split, right? So 1/3 for the city, 2/3 for the district. I think that's a valuable data point for you to have. You know, so I guess my question is, are we totally against these projects that occur outside of the border, or can we live with them given the cost share? There's certainly arguments to be made on both sides, and I can help lay those out if you want, but that's my question on this one.
Very well. Thanks for your background information. Supervisor Kelling.
Okay, so I did read through this whole plan. Yikes.
Bless you.
And I need to kind of qualify in order to answer your question.
Sure.
A couple of things. Historically, we didn't go with that Indiana project because that TID was looking at being paid off, whereas they were adding extra expenses after the fact. In this situation, it is a little bit different. This is part of the original plat, so it makes more sense. I'm against the project as a whole. However, should it pass, and what I've talked to residents in the area who one of their biggest concerns is that 18th Avenue wouldn't be able to handle that traffic, and to which I agree with them. So if you did not put this part as part of this thing and you built it without that being done, it would be a very, very bad thing for the local residents, not in this district. So I hope that makes sense. I was kind of all over the place there, but yeah, I'm against the whole damn thing. That's probably going to pass, though, you know, the way I look at it. But fighting this particular piece, I think, would actually be counterproductive, and I look at it as being exceptional to what we talked about last time, because they're really apples and oranges. You know, before you were looking at a district that was going to be paid off, and now you're adding it and lengthening it back out. I disagree with this on many different fronts. You know, and I'll have more questions down the road. But at least that part of it, I do understand why they need to do it.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the committee?
Not really.
I guess as I look at, you know, I understand wanting to improve 18th Avenue to make sure that it can handle the traffic, but when you look at it, there's also an exit out onto County Trunk Highway NN. And I would appreciate the opinion of our Chief of Public Works to see if he thinks that we would need to make changes there as well to make improvements that might not necessarily be included in the tax increment district financing. And I realize it's an unfair question to catch you off guard like that, but it's your opinion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, it's a very fair question. We have actually not been contacted by anybody on this development yet for access onto County Highway NN. It's quite possible that access might have to go to Public Works to get approved. They would have to make certain improvements, certainly turn lanes, bypass lanes, and the such. Not seeing any traffic volumes or projections yet, not seeing any plan that was given to us. There might be more that would be needed at that particular location, a traffic study, for instance. We just don't know yet what's all coming because nothing's been formally presented to us. We would also want to look at the intersection just to the east of this at Highway NN and Highway P. If you're not familiar, South Main Street as well in the city of West Bend, Rusco Drive to the east, and the traffic impact it might have just a little bit further on down the road as well. So it's certainly something we'd be interested in looking at, but yes, there might be other other avenues and other things that might have to be done out there that are outside the scope. I would assume they already accounted for turn lanes and bypass lanes out along County Highway NN, people turning in and turning out, but again, we haven't seen any plans yet.
Very good, thank you. So based on that information, it's hard to tell if there might not be additional TID expenses that aren't even included in this. Supervisor Chandra.
I was just gonna add that, with that knowledge, I am not for this either, until we get more information.
Yeah, I doubt that we'll get more information before it's time for Mr. Dahl's meeting and his input, but I would be curious, Supervisor Kelling, if you would mind sharing some of your other concerns with this venture.
So, thank you, Mr. Chairman. One of the things when I look at this, and Mr. Dahl, this is a question for you. As I look at the structure of this whole thing, it seems like it's all speculative. That, you know, these are all being done by assumption. Now, the builder can build his 95 units, and I can see that he has a timetable for that. That might happen, assuming the economy stays okay and everything's good. I've built 30 homes with my brother. I'm well aware of how the business works. So, okay, that might happen. It's the mixed use part, which would account for a significant portion of the payback of this TID, is completely speculative by what I'm seeing here. This retail area, possibly industrial area, is this another case of if we build it, they will come, like you had with Milwaukee Tool, where they didn't come? Because it's not a great place for trucks and stuff like that. You know, you're not that close. I mean, you can get to the freeway and stuff, even though it's like literally right there. There's no ramp in the area. You know, so there's a lot of reasons to not like the speculation, but the fact of the matter is if it's not filled and it's not providing the taxes, and you've already got this all the way out to the 20-year mark, which is where you like to see TIDs, this TID will go underwater. And that would lead the city on the hook, I would assume. And I guess also my question for you, Mr. Chairman, and this is what we alluded to earlier, is like, okay, just because I believe that the city of West Bend is doing something dumb with the structure of this TID, does that mean we, as the county, should necessarily stop them from doing it because there is, from local government control versus federal or state?
So to that point, we cannot stop them from doing it if there are, please remind me, how many members on a joint review board? Is it 5? So we have 20% of a vote, and we may, no matter how strenuously we may object, or how adamantly we may object, the other parties may vote for it, and it could happen anyway. So we can't stop it, but it is our responsibility to offer our opinion.
And that being said, those are some of the issues that I have, is the structure of the payback, the structure of the speculation, and where they came up with how that's going to work. Who would they have? From what I understand, there's no investors that are lined up for this. If somebody was like, hey, I'd be interested in building my factory there in the year 2028. Nobody really sets up, speculation that far in advance. Mm-hmm. So that's why when I looked at this, I knew that it was kind of like they're hoping somebody comes here, or they think somebody may, and that's what they're basing these numbers on. They're literally pulling them out of thin air.
Yeah, and that is accurate. The later phases of the development are more speculative than the early ones. I would tell you that is not entirely uncommon as far as tax incremental districts go as they're building them out. But that is a risk that is out there. So.
Public Works Director, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For me, we'd also look at the intersection at 18th and then into. I didn't want to gloss over that. Now I looked at a plan a little closer. Make sure if there's other people listening in on the meeting or viewing it later on, also be looking at that intersection.
Yep. Thank you. Do you have any dissenting opinion?
Yeah, I'm just thinking in general, from what I've seen too, I'm not a real huge fan of TIFs anyway, and the idea of the anticipating and build it and they will come is uncomfortable for me to recommend.
Very well. I don't disagree. So if you've got your opinion on this one, we'll move on to the next.
I do, yes, thank
Thank
you
you.
very much. So moving on to Tax Incremental District 6 in Kewaskum, which is being proposed. This is a very large TID in terms of land size and development potential. We're talking about 334 acres in the north and downtown areas of the village, and there's a substantial portion on and near the high school. The plan calls for expenditures of $38 million and is expected to generate $182 million of new property value. And the plan assumes that it'll take 18 of the 20 allowable years for the taxes on that new property to fund the expenditures planned in that district. The development assumptions include 94 single-family homes, 22 duplexes, 105 senior living units, and some commercial and retail buildings. So again, 180 million, that's a large TID. We've only got one in the county that's currently larger than that. That is the what was originally called the Briggs TID in Germantown. So for reference, Kewaskum's total property value is $520 million. So if you're adding $180 million to that, you're talking a big boost to that community. So very, very large, very substantial development here. The majority of the plan expenditures, there's developer incentives, there's some costs for a sanitary sewer lift station, and about $3 million for a downtown revitalization program. And the downtown revitalization program is the piece that I wanted to touch on with this committee. It's fairly unique in terms of in the TIF space. It's certainly allowed under state statute. These downtown revitalization programs can work wonders to help give downtowns a boost. So they are valuable. They can really provide that spark. Sometimes. So basically, my question for you is: do we agree with including this in the project plan as an initiative that should be funded with TIF? There's a number of funding options, but
Supervisor Shadron.
Thank you again. My first question on this is why such a big bite in one? I mean, that is a big change.
Mm-hmm.
Can Kewaskum handle something at that size? Is it reasonable to expect them to do something of this size?
That same question was brought up at the first Joint Review Board meeting, the introductory meeting that we had. They seem confident. Part of the reason for the size of the district, so when you're creating tax incremental districts, they have to be structured in a certain way. No more than, I think, 35% can be newly platted residential. They've got to have, X percent has to be this or that. And so I think there was a lot of creativity around, just based on the shape of it even, some creativity around how that was drawn. So the district is very large. Most of the activity is occurring in that very northern part of the district. And then obviously the downtown redevelopment piece in that downtown section that swings down the highway. So,
Was there any concerns brought up by local citizens on this one?
yes, there was some land that was annexed from the town, and so there was a significant citizen presence at the planning meeting that occurred right after the Joint Review Board meeting.
Are you finished, Mr. Shadron?
Yeah.
Supervisor Kelling for now. Yeah.
How long before this was that land annexed?
It was very recently annexed.
Doesn't the statute require a 3-year?
It does, and in exchange for that, the village is compensating the town with some proceeds from the district for lost tax revenue.
And that's allowed under statute?
That's allowed, yes.
Okay. I guess I do have some, because I know that there's a few local residents that are not happy with it, that are in the town. And some think it's relatively reckless of the city of Kewaskum, or the village of Kewaskum, to even do this, because it's such a massive undertaking. And the other thing I have concern with too is their water system, which is ungodly expensive. Whether or not this will actually stress that out and make it even more expensive, or actually make it cost efficient because it's treating it and spreading it out over a bigger distance, that's a question I don't have. You know, but I'd sure like to know. Literally, my mother and my family live in Kewaskum, so you know, these are some of the things that they're facing out there. I guess before it's like almost 20% of their village, you know, that they're gonna, the financial risk is enormous. But it does seem to be, I mean, I didn't see anything glaring about it, other than maybe that downtown part. But that's not uncommon in a lot of these TIFs. And downtown revitalization at least leads to economic development, as opposed to the TID where they did in West Bend, where they redid the Riverwalk, which, that's a park. I don't think a park belongs in TIDs. But, you know, if you're talking about cleaning up the streets of Kewaskum and stuff like that, I think it's reasonable if you're going to take on this project. Again, when I see these TIFs, we can raise these questions, and I certainly would like to see them raised. But I don't expect, I expect that this will probably pass. You know, but I think as the county, at least, we should at least just bring forth these questions. That we think these TIDs and TIFs are very reckless because they're very large, they're very speculative. At least this one, it's mostly residential, which is good because that, right now we have a shortage of housing, so, you know, I think that's likely to fill pretty darn quick. It's the business stuff that there's just nobody's building business right now. So that will make your TID fall short, I guarantee it. So just some points that I guess I
Appreciate that.
Thank you for your comments. Supervisor Schulteis.
My question is for Aaron, and how, do you know the attendance level at that public meeting? Was it well attended by the community, or?
As far as these meetings go, it's probably the most people I've ever seen at a planning commission meeting, which sometimes different issues drive attendance at those, and that's pretty typical. But you know, I guess from my perspective, there's more than I'm used to seeing.
I do have a couple, looking through it, I mean, boy, for all the people that don't like gerrymandering, they must absolutely hate this TIF district because it goes all over the place. I do like that it's planned to close early, but I do have concerns as well. It takes it right up to 0.2% of the maximum allowed by law from, if I recall correctly, 0.1 or 0.2%, so that's huge. And then the other concern I have is it's a $34 million developer incentive, which seems kind of high. And so I'd be curious to see who brought this concept forward, if it was in fact the village or if it was a developer trying to score a windfall. A couple other concerns I had on page 26. It looks like when you look at the residential area, yes, that in a TIF district, you want the residential area there so that you can get people in right away to start paying back the increment. I understand that, but it certainly doesn't fit with the goals that much of the county board has with regard to next generation housing and trying to make sure that it's affordable, right? I understand why the village would want to have as much high-end housing as they could get, but that's for someone else to decide. And then the next part of it, the greatest part of this, as I see it, if my math is right, was for residential, and that was where the increment was going to come from, as opposed to business. And also in there, when you look at on page 30, those are all developer assumptions. Those are not Ehlers assumptions with regard to those numbers. So Ehlers took what the developer said and just ran with it. I'd feel better if that was put forth by Ehlers itself rather than the developer. And then, yeah, just looking at the payment that's going to be made to the town, it just seems like this district pushes everything to the absolute limit as far as what corners can be cut, what advantages can be generated for the developer, and it just seems one-sided to me. And like everyone else, I expect they'll go forward with it, and I hope I'm wrong, but that's my opinion right now.
And yet it's still better than West Bend's district. Which just kills me.
Does that suffice for your
It
guidance?
does, yeah.
Very good.
It does.
All right, and we'll move on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 3C on the agenda is 2024 resolution consideration for the continuation of funding for the Hart and Homestead program.
All right.
We have a motion from Supervisor Shadron with a second from Supervisor Kelling. And yes, we'll give the floor back to you.
Great, thank you. So this resolution was brought in response so when we passed back in November the budget adjustment resolution, the county board expressed interest in having sort of a sunset resolution being brought forth for the Hart and Homestead program. The Land Use and Planning Committee is also going to be seeing one for the Conservation and Heritage Grant Program as well. So the ongoing funding was put into the budget in that budget adjustment resolution, and so this resolution is one of the two sunset resolutions. The Hart and Homestead one is coming to this committee because this committee oversees that program. So what this does is this resolution puts two triggers in. The first one being just generally in 2028, the program itself is going to go on to the agenda of a county board meeting to consider continuation of the program, continuation of the funding. So that's in there. And then the second trigger is if the funding source for this is interest on our investments, right? Interest income on our investments. As we know, that can be a volatile funding source. And so the second trigger is in the event that funding source, that revenue source declines below $2.5 million in total, that's our second trigger to revisit the funding for this program. And then at that time, we'll determine if we've got another funding source, if we reduce the program funding, if we cut it all together, so it would be brought back onto an agenda at that time. So that's really what this resolution does, but happy to answer any other questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee?
Oh, this answers those questions we had before.
Yep.
Yeah, this is the answer.
Right.
Yep. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to item 3D, 2024 resolution, master plan initial debt resolution.
I've talked at you enough, I think, on this one. We've got Margie Hammers here. She can help answer questions about the technical side of this. I'm here to obviously help fill in.
Very well. Welcome, Margie.
Good evening. So I'm hoping this isn't any new information.
Pardon me. Do we have a motion and a second, please? Take Supervisor Schulteis, Supervisor Kelling.
All right, so as
Sorry for the interruption.
previously discussed, we are getting ready to do the first debt issue for the funding of the master plan work and some road projects that are coming up this spring and summer. So the total debt issue that the county is looking at is $10 million. The actual breakdown of the spend on that right now is still being worked out, but it will be limited to those two projects, the remodeling and the road. So there won't be anything new added to that. It's just determining how much is needed for each of those areas. This initial resolution is just approving us to put this out for bid, which basically means that our financial advisor puts this out on the market. Investors bid on what kind of interest rate they would like. And then, of course, the lowest interest rate is selected, and then that's how the county is ensuring that we get the best rates. For a AAA rated county, which we are, it's the most recommended way to do it, just because it's a very favorable type of bond issue to be at that rating, so there would be no reason to directly sell it, which we had previously done in the past. So once the board approves this at their next meeting, the financial advisor will put that out for bid, and then we will come back with a special executive meeting and right before the board meeting the following month to do the actual final approvals to award that bid and then issue the debt. So then the proceeds would be available for the counties to use late March, early April.
Supervisor Shadron.
Sorry to be asking all the questions.
It's all right.
No, that's what you're here for, right?
And we do have to vet it out, exactly. I just have two questions. Number one, do you have any idea of where the interest rates might be at now? And then the second question is, where are we at with our overall debt load to date?
So interest rates, when we first were looking at this with our advisor, we were somewhere between that 3.5%. We're not expecting a significant change in that level, even with the current increases. It usually takes a little bit of time for that to kind of work into some of these government debt issue markets. So we're still planning on that. And our current debt load, let me just open up my worksheet here quick. It closed out on me. Excel is not my friend today. I don't know why. I think I overused it.
Yeah. Does that mean the debt's closed out?
That would be nice. I mean, I would put my personal budget in there too. Everything's paid off, right? My worksheet says it's paid. So at the end of 24, we are currently at about 22 million of general debt, and then there's of course the 3 million of debt that we're currently working to close out for Samaritan. So that'll shift into general debt. So we'll be closer to about maybe 25 in total.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? If not, all in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Are there any opposed? Motion carries.
All right,
Thank you.
you.
Our next meeting is scheduled for February 19th, 2025. We are adjourned. Thank you.